All righty. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. And so honored with the guest that we have for the hour. She is our returning champion. We have Margaret Kimberley. Margaret, as everybody should know by now, she is the executive editor of Black Agenda Report, which is news commentary analysis from a Black left perspective. And it's Black Agenda Report. You do not have to say the Black Agenda Report. I still don't get why outlets keep doing that. Margaret is also a member of the Black Alliance for Peace, and she's also been a longtime member, and we should actually promote this group more often, UNAC, which is the United, how do you say that?
National Anti-War Coalition.
United National Anti-War Coalition.
Correct.
Fantastic. And I've actually been to several of their online events, and it's a fantastic anti-imperialist group, which is always consistent. And yes, this is our this is our Make Me Wanna Holler series. This is our all things it's also the Margaret Kimberley edition, because we have entire playlists of Margaret's past interviews here and other great appearances. And yes, so let's get to it. Margaret, first off, thank you so much for coming back on the show, because it has been too long.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. I know you've been asking me, and I'm extremely busy, but I just said I've got to get back to Youri. So thank you for your persistence.
You are the executive editor now of Black Agenda Report, which is a full-time job, and especially because Wednesday is when you drop all of the new articles and the interviews of the week and so forth. So anyway, so it's a real honor to have you back on, Margaret. And let's get straight. Yes, let's get straight into it. The first question I wanted to talk, the first question I wanted to ask you, Margaret, is you did a fantastic article for Black Agenda Report on Eric Adams and the death of Black politics. So talk to us about the mayor of New York and this very strong indictment that you did of him. And for some, and I guess for some background information, folks, if they go to Black Agenda Report, there was a really good article that Black Agenda Report republished, where a journalist, talked about how Eric Adams, one of his big backers, was Rupert Murdoch's waste of ink paper, the New York burnt toast. I'm sorry, the New York Post. So, yes, talk to us about Eric Adams and what's going on in New York, and how it's it's just one stark example of just how bad things are for Black Americans and Latinx American in places like New York and so forth.
Well, thank you so much. We at Black Agenda Report have talked a lot about Black politics, and that does not necessarily mean Black politicians. There are plenty of Black politicians, but Black politics, we mean a polity that centers Black people, that says we have unique needs, which says that those needs must be met, which says that there has to be an effort to be inclusive, to consider what we need. It also means that the people have to be organized well enough to make themselves heard. So having a Black mayor does not mean that a city, in this case, New York, is one that has good Black politics. So we have the mayor who is Black. We have I know your viewers are all over the world, but the leaders of our New York State legislature are two Black people. The head of the New York City Council is a Black woman. Borough presidents are Black. So there are lots of Black people in high positions. But the way to get those positions is to raise a lot of money from rich people, to curry favor with the newspapers. And we're not talking about anybody progressive. We're talking about in New York, the money's in real estate developers. They run politics in New York. They're the ones who raise all the money. And Eric Adams really, well, he partially perfected getting buy-in from those folks, from the a conservative newspaper like the Post, from rich people. But it turned out not only was that a problem, and none of these people, none of them are interested in what the people need. They're not interested in getting affordable real estate developers. Do they want more affordable housing? No, they do not. That's one of the biggest needs that folks have here in New York City. And you can't become mayor unless you curry favor with the people who are determined for that affordability not to be something that people have in their housing needs. So, but on the one hand, he had this campaign that ensured he would have support from all of these folks. But on the other hand, he's not very smart. He's crooked. The people around him are crooked. He was indicted. It was a federal indictment, a violation of New York City campaign laws for. It's mostly about that. Getting donations in the United States. Non-citizens cannot make donations to political campaigns, but they, for some reason, had this relationship with Turkish nationals. He gave Turkey was building a large consulate in New York City, and he made sure that fire department regulations were this regulatory, very important process was speeded up for them. There were Turkish nationals giving to his campaign. There were straw donors, meaning people who didn't really exist, who allegedly made donations when they didn't. So they would say Margaret Kimberley donated $50, and there is no Margaret Kimberley, or they come back to me and say I didn't give money to Eric Adams. And New York has a matching program, very generous. So every dollar raised, the city kicks in $8. So if you give $100 to a campaign, the campaign gets $800. So there was fraud there. He managed to have like a terrible staff, people who, like him, weren't very smart, weren't very ethical. The police commissioner has resigned. The acting police commissioner resigned. The school's chancellor resigned. They were hiring relatives, siblings who've also resigned their jobs. I mean, it's just a huge mess. But it says a lot about Black politics, or rather the lack of it, and what it means for people in New York and in cities across the country.
So you would definitely a stupid follow-up question would be, is he the perfect example of what Black Agenda Report calls the Black Misleadership Class?
Well, he is, but he's also like not part of that traditional group. He tried to forge these new alliances, kind of in the way that they did. So it's partly that there's some things about him that are sort of unique, not a conventional figure, but the system allowed him to become mayor. And that says something about the Black misleadership class. And by that, we mean the people who have achieved elective office or appointed office, but not because, actually, in spite of the fact that they don't act in the interests of Black people, that they have patrons, sponsors, who rich people or other politicians, or mostly the Democratic Party, who don't operate on behalf of the people. But they have high position, influence, get media attention, make a lot of money, and but they don't represent us, and they don't represent our needs. So yes, he is an example of someone in that group.
But also his background, and this I find this I find the most strange as to why people from the Black community, particularly the affluent or the upper middle class, prop a guy like this guy up. I mean, in a state like New York, which, yes, when it comes to federal elections, they do mostly vote Democrats, and you can argue that some of these politicians, black politicians from Democrats, are certainly left leaning certainly liberal ish. Eric Adams, though, comes from the most regressive elements of a state like New York, which is he was a cop. He was a police officer, which makes it even more strange that Drink Champs, which is a very lighthearted hip hop program I watch with this rapper Noriega, who's of a Dominican Latino background. They invited Eric Adams on their program, where he got to basically propagate himself, not really ask any tough questions about his policies and stuff like that. And then I know now innocent until proven guilty, but Diddy, who's who's under intense investigations for apparently sex trafficking and being a serial whatever. He propped up Eric Adams, and then KRS-One, one of the few old school rappers who still has a bit of an underground career, but a career nonetheless. I mean, everybody knows his great protest song, "The Sound of the Police," and here he is propping up Eric Adams, who he doesn't advocate any Bernie Sanders type policy. He doesn't advocate any AOC type of policies, and again, like, he's a crooked, man from certainly from the Clinton, Obama, Biden, Kamala Harris faction of the party.
He was a police officer, and he talks about that constantly. Instead of being the mayor of all the people, he says, I'm a cop, I'm a cop. He said that many times. Law and order, stoking fear of crime. Crime rates have gone down in New York. It's nothing like the bad old days, nothing like it. It's much safer. I mean, that's not to say there isn't any crime or there aren't any problems in New York, but the police themselves create a lot of problems too in communities. So this crime panic that he and others, fan the flames of, the subways are no more dangerous now. I think they are safer than they were years ago. But he and the governor, they have National Guard in some subway stations. It's ridiculous. They stand there, they're on their phones, they're checking some bags, but mostly not. It's all theater. And it's designed to prevent any progressive legislation. So, for example, a few years ago, the state legislature passed a bail reform plan. It was very modest, and basically they said you cannot ask defendants to post bail they cannot afford for crimes that are not of a serious nature. And you would have thought they opened the jails and let everybody out. It was immediately attacked. They've watered it down, so now it doesn't mean anything. Adams was one of the people who took up that charge. And one reporter asked him a great question. Said, Mr. Mayor, well, now that you've been indicted, you've said people should stay in jail when they've been charged. Should you be in jail? So, which was a great question. He didn't really answer it. But so those are some of the things about Eric Adams that are unique. And, he's not a very serious person either. He likes to party. That's why he knows these celebrities. And there's this now famous photo of him with Diddy and others. KRS-One is some press conference. I think they were announcing concerts or something in the parks. There's some, something that is a good thing to have, but KRS-One was supposed to be one of these political rappers. And he quite rightly was called out. I was like, Eric Adams, that's the mayor you appear in public with. So, he's a problem. He is supposed to run for, I feel like he's been mayor 100 years. It's only almost 3 years, and he's supposed to run for re-election next year. That's not going to happen. I doubt very much that he will serve out his term. He will either resign or the governor could remove him. So his political career is over. But I think the fact that he was able to become mayor says a lot about the failure of politics in this city.
I have to ask them this follow-up question. Has he continued the very neo-Dickensian, new Jim Crow type of policies that Rudy Giuliani championed, and then later, Michael Bloomberg, and then later the mayor before him?
De Blasio.
Exactly. So
De
has he?
Blasio was slightly different from that. De Blasio ran as this leftist, as this progressive, and he was not what he advertised himself to be. But Eric Adams has brought back Bloomberg stop and frisk, where thousands of people, most of them Black, were stopped by police without cause, which is unconstitutional, harassed, searched. Um, it was, if you didn't have ID on you, they would arrest, which is not legal, by the way. You could be certain, you could be arrested because you did not have ID on you. I mean, it was horrible. And Adams has brought back stop and frisk, not to the level of Bloomberg, but this was something that just terrorized Black communities. I mean, there were hardly any white people, it was mostly Black people, some Latinos, and two or three white people. And it's something that Adams has brought back. So there's so many reasons to want him to be glad he's not going to be mayor anymore. And then, of course, it's so shameful. He runs back to everybody when they're in trouble. Suddenly, they run back to the Black community. You have these ministers; they're praying over him, and then they're praying again, and there's more prayer. And I don't know what God wants to do with Eric Adams. That's his decision. But it's just pimping off of Black people and off our religious tradition, and I resent it very much. And it's one more indication that he's an unethical person.
But what does that say? That's this is a very good follow-up question, and I have to ask. But what does that say then about the state of the state of Black politics? Because we do have what I call the Black grifter class. These are the kind of Black Republicans and people like uh, Don. These are people like Don King. It's gonna be a bit controversial for me to say this, but to an extent, the NAACP and the Nation of Islam. What does that say about then those groups which are supposed to be the advocates of Black people and speaking truth to the powerful and mobilizing the powerless, when they prop up a guy like Eric Adams, who, again, as you say, is a cop and who and we're not talking about Frank Serpico. We're talking about a person who's champion broken windows theory, which again I called neo-Dickensian. For those who do follow Black politics, it's very neo Jim Crow, new Jim Crow type of politics. So what does that say then about our Black churches and others who prop a person like Eric Adams up, or even somebody like or even somebody like Barack Obama, who we've talked about before at length, and how and how he well, wasn't good for Black people. Certainly wasn't good for anybody, but definitely not good for the Black
Well,
community.
he also represented the rich people who put him in office. That's the story for almost every elected official in the United States. But it says that um, uh, there are a lot of you prosper if you're unethical. So if a church, sometimes these churches can make money, they're faith-based programs, they can get contracts. And so, many of them will go along and be the face of the government, of the city government. They get publicity or they get contracts or something. Um, and they don't, first of all, play. So, how good a role are you playing spiritually if your ethos is all about making contacts with the high and the mighty? And church was, I think, less so today, but it was always played a big role in Black communities and people's not just religious lives, but in our lives overall. So it says that nothing's sacred. as the saying goes. Churches aren't sacred. They can be bought off. There are church leaders who can be bought off. So overall, it's rather a sad story.
And I'm going to actually switch my questions around and ask you, uh, that's actually a perfect segue to this question, which is, it's another one of these ridiculous election cycles or plutocratic selection cycles. Joe Biden, the outgoing president, what are your thoughts on his? What are your thoughts on his legacy, actually?
His legacy is going to be genocide. That is his legacy. Joe Biden has aided and abetted Israel's ethnic cleansing. The U.S. can unfortunately pressure the UN and the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, and the International Criminal Court, the ICC, who have done nothing. Israel's crimes are all, they have documented them themselves. Israeli soldiers have video and photos of themselves committing war crimes. War crimes, by the way, are defined. They're defined in the Geneva Conventions. Collective punishment is a war crime. If you say we're going to destroy this entire neighborhood because we think Hamas is there, well, that's a violation of the Geneva Conventions. It's collective punishment. And it means that Israel, the burden of proof is on them. You can't just say, we thought Hamas was there, or, show video of one of the many hospitals they destroyed. And they said, you see, these are Hamas tunnels. And I'm looking at it, I said, that's a hallway. It's just the hallway of a hospital. And to say that it's a Hamas tunnel is just a lie. And even if on those rare circumstances that you could attack a hospital because there were combatants using it, you are not allowed to unplug and destroy medical equipment. You're not allowed to have babies die in their incubators, which happened. You're not allowed to blow up schools, blow up universities, bomb a tent refugee camp where we saw people burning to death. Those are forbidden under international law. But Israel couldn't do it without the Biden administration. So they violated US law. For example, Israel has been keeping food out of Gaza. And that meant that Israel was not supposed to get any aid from the US. That was a violation of US law. So they lied about it. Secretary of State Blinken lied. And that's going to be Biden's legacy, is killing, it's about 200,000 people. And that was just Gaza. Now they're attacking Lebanon as well. You're not allowed to kill.
And also, we also forget Syria, but Israel, which isn't even like officially at war with Syria. Syria, has just overcome a humongous Western Gulf Israeli Turkish war of aggression on that country, where they exported ISIS death squads and stuff like that onto Syria. Syria has managed to overcome that, and yet Israel is still bombing them, if not every day of the week, it seems like every other day.
They bombed an Iranian government, an Iranian a consulate in Damascus. Consulates and embassies are not supposed to be bombed, period. They aren't. U.S. troops are in Syria, and this is something that Obama did. He began the destruction of Syria, the effort at regime change. They didn't go to Congress. They didn't tell the people there are U.S. troops in Syria. The U.S. occupies about a quarter of the country, steals Syria's oil. Syria is under a sanctions regime. Even if you want to send money to your family in Syria, you can't do it without you can't do it because of U.S. sanctions. And as you said, using these jihadist forces, the Al-Nusra Front, which is Al-Qaeda, which we're supposed to hate, which is supposed to be our enemy. But like the other Al-Qaeda, is one that was used by the U.S. as a proxy. So murdering the leaders of Hamas, murdering Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon, killing hundreds of other people to do it. These are crimes, period, the end. But this is going to be Biden's legacy. It's going to be the genocide, and if Kamala Harris loses, it's going to be a big part of the reason why. Many people, quite rightly, have said that's my red line. I have looked over other things. I have overlooked, rather, other issues I didn't like. I've held my nose and voted for Democrats, but a genocide is not something I can vote for. And that is exactly what you're voting for if you vote for Kamala Harris. She talks out of both sides of her mouth about she wants a ceasefire and too many Palestinians have died and it's so terrible and I want peace. Well, you can have peace. Stop arming Israel. That's his legacy. His biggest legacy is going to be genocide. His biggest legacy is going to be Ukraine. They are cynically, they know it's over. They know Russia has won, but they are going to keep this going through January to make sure Ukraine doesn't completely fall apart until he leaves office. Men are being literally, I mean, this is something else documented. Everybody's running around with a cell phone, right? Men are being dragooned, grabbed off the street to join, forced to join Ukraine's army, where they get a little bit of training and then they're sent off to die. And this is also billions of dollars that the American people want to have used here. We're on the verge of war with Iran. This is something that the press doesn't talk about it. They don't ask the candidates about it. You know, Trump had a little stunt a couple of days ago where he put on an apron and worked at a McDonald's. And allegedly it's because Kamala Harris said she worked at McDonald's and other people said, no, she never worked at McDonald's. So, you know, this is supposed to score some kind of political points against her by saying, well, I really worked at McDonald's. So he's in an apron, he's working at McDonald's. Nobody's talking about war with Iran. The U.S. has strung along Iran and other countries saying, we're working for a ceasefire, but it was all a lie. They murdered Nasrallah. Iran had a very pinpoint strikes against Israel. They only hit military facilities, proving that Israel could only hit military facilities, except there aren't really any of them. And they want to, and this is something Israel has wanted for decades, to have U.S. help in attacking Iran. They can't do it by themselves. So this is something that has not come up, not been discussed in Congress, not discussed by the major newspapers. This is going to be Biden's legacy. After saying he would turn the ruble to rubble, Russia's doing just fine. They've overcome the sanctions. Vladimir Putin is still the president. The Russian army actually is stronger now after fighting in Ukraine for 2 years. It's been an abject failure. There have been thousands of Ukrainians killed, and they're continuing anyway to make sure it doesn't fall apart until after January 20th. That's going to be his biggest legacy. His other legacy is going to be
yeah, I was going to ask, when it comes to Black people, because you've done a brilliant book, Prejudicial America and Black America and its presidents. So if you could do a chapter about Joe Biden, what would have been his legacy towards Black people and his big dog whistles towards the Black community to say to the racists that overpopulate the United States, see, I am one of the presidents that's going to make sure that, Negroes with special treatment.
He's a phony. He was always one of the more conservative Democrats. He, as regards to Black people, he's one of the people in the Senate who always took the lead against school busing for integration. He'd make these very racist statements about he didn't want the country to be a racial jungle. He was one of the leaders when he was still a senator, of Bill Clinton's crime bill, which put so many Black people in prison. What did he do as president, aside from making Juneteenth a national holiday, which who the hell needed that? The Supreme Court has eviscerated the Voting Rights Act. and the enforcement provisions. He didn't try to do that. He didn't raise the minimum wage. So he was basically a phony throwing, a servant of the oligarchy, a servant of the ruling class, but he pretended to be otherwise. That's the other thing that he's going to be known for. He should be known as a failed president. He should be known as the genocide president. That is his legacy. And I don't, and they've already started doing it. When he dropped out of the race, when it was clear he was not up to the job, the same donors who put him in took him out. And everybody said, "Oh, he's a good man. He put the country first. He's a good man. He's good." He is not a good man. He has
But he was
been the
allowed.
cause of great evil around the world.
But lots of black people, I think, would support Joe Biden because he was the vice president under Barack Obama. It still is a very taboo subject, I believe, amongst the black community, whether Obama was a good president who wanted to do good but couldn't because of the far right Republicans. That's often the excuse why Democrats don't do good is because the Republicans are all so powerful. Hence, why we have to keep voting Democrats in order to eradicate the Republicans. But yeah, so I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that and remind people why Barack Obama was not a good president for black people and a majority working poor public, because I know Obama has been, again, on the campaign trail, propping up Kamala Harris, and has been finger wagging once again at his favorite target, which is black men. Black men apparently aren't coming out for Kamala Harris, and that's because we have a unique sexist problem in the black community with massage and war or whatever. So can you talk to us about that and even push back against that?
Well, you described it perfectly. He, as president, he was marketed very well, marketed as a progressive. He was nothing of the sort. Um, the um, the banking crisis, the Wall Street crash began just as he was coming into office, 2008, 2009. Many Black people lost their homes. He did nothing. He didn't lift a finger. That's how, where the biggest asset for most Black people is home ownership, and people lost their houses. He was like, and anytime he was asked, "Are you going to do anything particular for Black people?" he would say, "No, rising tide lifts all boats. I'm going to help everybody, and that's going to help Black people too." Except he didn't help other people much either. His legacy is regime change, is destroying Libya, is trying to destroy Syria. That's his legacy, the coup against the elected president of Ukraine in 2014. All of those things are his legacy as well. People say Obamacare falls far short of what we need in this country. We need to have a free national healthcare system like people have all over the world, the rest of the world.
And
And
what is, and actually, what is the problem with what is the central problem of Obamacare, which the Republican opposition claimed was socialism?
it wasn't, it was a lie. It was, they did not want a Black president to have a legislative success. The best thing about Obamacare was expanding Medicaid. That Medicaid is the healthcare program for low income people, which is administered by the states. So states could reject, almost all of them in the South could reject the Medicaid expansion, which was detrimental to, so most Black people still live in the South, by the way. Um, so it helped some people. You had the right to buy insurance, but it's expensive. It's not cheap care.
Yeah.
And it enshrined the privatization of the healthcare system. It was a giveaway to insurance companies and to big pharma, even though there were aspects of it that were helpful. That young people could stay on their parents' insurance until they were, I think, 26 years of age. So that was, a good thing. It helped many people, but it's a far cry from what we ought to have. And I called it Nixon care. It's something actually that Richard Nixon proposed like in the 70s, like 50 years ago. So it was not some left-wing program. I mean, that's just
Some people
nonsense.
even say that Obamacare was basically Mitt Romney's
Basically, yes, and
heritage
it was,
healthcare plan.
it was,
In other words, very, very business friendly to the private insurance companies and to private health facilities.
yes, it was. Mitt Romney as governor of Massachusetts, he had a similar plan, and it was very conservative. You're pointing out the right-wing think tanks for years. That is what they proposed, what Obamacare was. But as the country moves further and further to the right, something which is a conservative plan is viewed as being left-wing socialist. What we should be so lucky as to have socialist policies in the U.S. But that certainly was not one of them.
But then, that's a perfect segue to the 2024 race, and we might even have a little mini debate about this because I know for a fact you're going to be voting for Dr. Jill Stein and Butch Ware, right?
I am.
Okay, so and I have nothing against people who are going to be voting for the Green Party. Got nothing against people who are going to be voting for Party for Socialism and Liberation, Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia. I also have nothing against people who hold their nose and vote Democrats because they're so afraid of the far right Republican reign of terror that Donald Trump is going to unleash if he has his political comeback. But then, well, first off, why do you think the Black community and other marginalized groups, from Indigenous people, queer folks, working class people of all colors, and Latinx people, should vote for Dr. Jill Stein and Butch Ware as opposed to Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia of Party for Socialism and Liberation?
I can't say that much about the PSL platform, so I can't say that they're worse or anything. I think I'm a Green. I think the Green Party is in the strongest position to bring about political change, and the strongest position to be on the ballot in more states. And as I said, I can't speak to the PSL platform, but the Green Party platform, we say people, planet, and peace. It is what most people want. If you read the Green platform, it's what people want. People are concerned about climate change, all of which is caused by production of fossil fuels, which does not change from Republicans to Democrats. Democrats will talk a good game, but there's just as much oil drilling on federal lands under Biden, actually more under Biden than under Trump. The oil companies are still being subsidized. I could go on. It's absolutely phony. Um, the Green Party is a peace party. So the Green Party platform is cut the military budget in half. It's $800 billion now. It's huge. And half
And
of the
also,
federal budget.
and also, if you are concerned about militarism, the military is the biggest climate offender and the biggest climate criminal.
Yes. I mean, there are 800 US military bases around the world. That's a lot of jet fuel. That's a lot of fuel for ships. I mean, you can just think about it. It's just common sense that tells you that has an impact on the environment. US military is the world's biggest polluter. Um, raising the minimum wage, having a national health care system. This is what people want. The Green Party is not proposing anything strange. They're proposing what people want to see. But we're told that's not what people want, or we're just, browbeaten. If you vote for the Steinway campaign instead of Harrison Walls, you're going to put Trump. You're voting for Trump. You're voting for Trump if you vote for Trump. If you vote for the Green Party, you voted for the Green Party. Um, with a nuclear disarmament, we don't have diplomacy in this country. There's a war in Ukraine because the U.S. wanted a war. They did not want to resolve diplomatically the problem, actually the problem that the West caused by insisting Ukraine be in NATO and encroaching on Russia's territory and so forth. So the Green Party talks about having real diplomacy. The Green Party, I mentioned the healthcare system, raising the minimum wage, all of these things that would help people, that would help people live, forgive student loan debt. All of these, we're told to go to college, go to university. It's, people who graduate from college make more money, but then you're in debt the rest of your life. It's something that just is not discussed. Green Party is the of all of the minor parties has been around the longest and is the strongest and best able to counter the duopoly.
So if you could talk to somebody who was considering voting for Party for Socialism and Liberation, and you were to say and you were to say to them, this is why you should support the Green Party, I think the biggest argument, which I think works in favor of the Green Party, whether you're 100% impressed with them or whether you think the PSL is still a better left alternative, is the fact that Dr. Stein and leaders before her have all said that if you vote for us and if we just make it nationwide or just enough to go past 5%, we then do get federal funding, and then we can grow the party and actually be quite a force in American politics, socioeconomics. Talk briefly about that, actually.
Well, I would not make a case against PSL. If someone told me, and I know people who are, going to vote for the PSL candidates, I'd say that's fine. We have to stop voting for Democrats and stop acting like they're this left-wing party when they aren't, when they stand for everything leftists oppose. So I wouldn't argue with someone who told me they were going to vote for PSL. I would say, as you point out, if the Greens get 5% of all votes cast in, the Green Party is entitled to federal campaign funds. And the rap against the Greens is they don't build the party, they only run for president. That's not true. There are Greens running for office all the time in local races. But, so they do this thing where they say, well, I don't hear much about the Greens, only every 4 years. It's like, well, talk to the media who won't give the Greens attention. Talk to the Democrats who try to kill. Here in New York State, where I live, the Greens aren't even on the ballot. Our terrible former governor, Andrew.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Hold on one second, folks.
The ballot.
Okay.
So
okay, you're back. Sorry,
yes,
there's a problem with my
froze,
internet.
but I hope you heard what I said. So that's the problem that the smaller parties have. But I think, especially with this genocide going on, I would tell them, don't vote for the genocide. Kamala Harris is a double talker. She talks about a ceasefire, but she also says, I would not have an arms embargo against Israel. So there's no change. There's nothing different. We've got to start over. We cannot keep defending these people, these horrible policies, and let somebody say the word Trump and you act like Pavlov's dog and, start salivating and saying, all I can think about is Trump. Foreign policy is the same. This week I'm writing about Cuba, which people may know because of US sanctions, because it's been designated a state sponsor of terrorism. Cuba's economy is suffering terribly. US sanctions have strangled Cuba's economy. Its electrical grid needs to be replaced. But, they're holding it together as best they can. So people are suffering because the US wants regime change. They have not given up, more than 60 years after the Cuban Revolution, they have not given up this goal of regime change. And making war, it's war without bombs or bullets against 1/3 of the countries in the world are under US sanctions. And we have to say, and that's bipartisan. Trump, on his way out the door about a week before he was leaving office, put Cuba back on the state sponsor of terrorism list. And Biden kept it. So all this talk about, well, Trump is this outlier fascist. Apparently he isn't, because Biden followed him. His policy towards Israel is the same as Trump's. So this idea that, as a person, he's a unique individual. His persona is an interesting one. And people are, I'm not going to tell anybody they ought to like Trump. But, a lot of the policies are bipartisan. Democrats always gave actually their allocations to the military budget were bigger than what Trump asked for. So yes, I would prefer that there were Democrats making appointments to the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary. But aside from that, I can't see a big difference. And even when they say we're going to codify the Roe v. Wade decision and protect abortion rights, they don't tell you how they're going to do it. That's because they're not really serious about it. They aren't serious about really, they like divided government. They like having to cut deals with the Republicans. Kamala Harris is spending all her time now talking about Republicans, that she'd have a Republican in her cabinet. She'd have a bipartisan advisory board. Dick Cheney. Why are you bragging about Dick Cheney and his dumb daughter endorsing you? Why is that a big thing? I mean, she's telling you, she is letting you know that she is going to have a conservative administration. It's coming straight from the horse's mouth. And there's no reason for anybody to be afraid of Trump being president. People need to learn to organize again instead of just cowering in fear about Trump winning. So I don't have a fear of Trump being president instead of Kamala Harris. I have a fear about Kamala Harris being president. I think she's a hollow, I call her the hollow woman. I don't know what she stands for, aside from being ambitious, aside from having rich friends who keep promoting her. She's a terrible politician. The word salads, the nervous laugh, that's someone who's not sure of themselves. I think she can be swayed. She can be, convinced to, bomb Iran or do who knows what. And this blaming black men, and I mean it's insulting. And then she comes up with this list after Obama's little tirade went over like a lead balloon. They said, well, this is what we're going to do for black men. We're going to protect crypto. I don't understand that. It's like, because crypto industry is a big supporter of hers. Um, and we're going to,
Wow,
maybe
wow, and of course,
loan and
and of course, anybody who knows what kind of a scam crypto is has to check out the work of Dr. Jared Ball at Black Liberation Media, because he's done a very good job going into how much of a scam this is and how this is part of the whole black buying power con
black
artistry.
capitalism con. Absolutely. So it'll be, the election is 2 weeks from today. I'm not sure who's going to win, frankly. Um, uh, Kamala Harris she's not going to get the high turnout that she needs. She's not trying to appeal to Democrats at all. So I think it's a failed policy why would Republicans vote for her when they could vote for Trump? There are these mythical, never Trump Republicans. I think there are like 5 or 6 of them, frankly. Republicans like him. All Republicans, excuse me, all Trump voters don't wear red hats and go to Trump rallies. I think Republicans are going to vote for Trump. He's their guy. And he is the one who actually went through the primary process. He's the one whose nomination actually is Democratic, small d, Democratic. Nobody voted for Kamala Harris. They tried to push through Biden again, fell flat on his face. They pushed her through, and she, doesn't even say the most basic things that would get people to vote for her, because the oligarchs won't let her. They will not. They don't want to hear about lately. Now, 2 weeks before election day, suddenly she's talking about raising the minimum wage. Biden lied about that. I don't know if there's enough time left for her, but while she's still running around with Liz Cheney to make that claim. So I won't. All that to say, I won't be surprised if Trump wins.
But then a quick follow-up question, because I really want to ask you three things, if it's even possible, about your time in China and what you uncovered about China. But then, okay, so then a very quick follow-up then about Kamala Harris is the following. Now, spoiler alert for everyone. I think, unfortunately, Jill Stein is not going to become president. I don't think Claudia de la Cruz is going to become president, and certainly Dr. Cornel West, who I've not been impressed with his campaign, he ain't going to win either. But that being said, if we do have a pumpkinhead political comeback, and he does unleash the gates of hell of right-wing terror. I know for a fact you would still say to people to support the Greens, and if they get that 5%, that's a huge victory for democracy against plutocracy. But then, what would you say to somebody? And because I've been having arguments with myself about this, which is okay. Yes, the Democrats are terrible. They're another Wall Street party. They're another Zionist party. They're another pro-nuclear weapons party. They're a neo-Keynesian party, a new Jim Crow party. But the Republicans still are worse. But if you have the Democrats, so let's say you're across the table from a Democrat like Kamala Harris or somebody like Trump. I know for a fact, I'm pretty sure most left-leaning people would rather the Democrats be their enemies, but then that means that we do have to organize, mobilize, and influence the Democrats to do good stuff because the Republicans are not going to listen to us. So how would you say, so how would you say that as an argument? Because this is a question I've asked members of communist parties and members of Trotskyist parties like the Socialist Equality Party, in which I say, look, people are always going to judge your book by the cover. People, as you say about the Greens, there's a lot of stupid stuff that's said about the Greens, that Jill Stein's not an eco-socialist and blah 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 blah, and all sorts of stuff like that. But since our people power movements do follow them, why not then mobilize ourselves as being independent from the Democrats, but we do try to influence the Democrats to do good, if it's even possible?
Well, you can't influence them. They don't want to be influenced. They are quite happy being the party of Wall Street and weapons manufacturers and fossil fuel producers. That's what they want. They don't want to change. So stop it. Stop with the I can change the Democrats. We need real democracy. And that means voting for who you want. And struggling for what we want. Because what do we get when we get Democratic presidents? We got the crime bill from Bill Clinton. We got the media consolidation. There are 6 corporations that control what you see and read in the United States. That's because of him. We got the end of the welfare reform, which ended the 60-year right to secure public assistance. So that's what we got out of him. What did we get out of Obama? Trillions of dollars to financial services institutions. The banks did well. The pharmaceutical companies did well. We got the destruction of Libya. We got the destruction of Syria, near destruction of Syria. So what did you get out of him? And, people go on and on about the Supreme Court. They didn't even fight for that. They screwed that up. They let Ruth Bader Ginsburg hang around. He didn't want to fight and make a recess appointment. So the loss of the Supreme Court, that's on the Democrats too. So I'm not afraid anymore. I survived Trump, which is one of the things, frankly, if he wins, there are people saying, it seemed impossible for Trump to be president, and it was a shock to many people. But most people survived. They weren't any worse off. So even if they don't like him, they don't, just saying Trump isn't enough to scare them into voting for Kamala Harris, who they don't like. As far as my trip to China, I see we only have like 5 minutes left.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes, yes.
in
And
April of this year.
the three questions, the three big questions I want to ask about China. So we're gonna have you come back on the program, and we'll do an entire episode actually about your
Okay.
time in China. But I do have to ask you then these very three very important questions about your time in China. So I want you to say why Black people, particularly Black Africans, why they should not be afraid about the rise of China, and why China is not a rival capitalist imperialist in the continent of Africa, and also for people who say that China is also a rival settler colonial country to the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada because of China's treatment of Tibetan Buddhists and Uyghur Muslims. Make the case why no, China is, first of all, China is not a reactionary influence in African affairs, and no, they do not practice settler colonialism to the Tibetan Buddhists and Uyghur Muslims.
Well, first of all, who treated Africa worse than European countries? I mean, King Leopold of Belgium carried out the first genocide of the 20th century, was carried out by Europeans. King Leopold in Belgium, the Germans in Namibia. They refused to pay any reparations to Namibia, although they keep paying them to Israel. Nobody treated Africa worse than European countries. Nobody. So China doesn't have any colonies. Yes, China does business. Yes, Chinese companies are making money in African countries, but China also forgives debt of African countries. The World Bank has never done that. The IMF has never done that. They don't seek military conquest. China, and I'm not saying all of these, they can participate in these the mining companies. There are Chinese mining companies in Congo where these people work under these horrific conditions. They're Chinese companies.
And all of that, and all of that empowers the ethno-nationalist Paul Kagame, who is the real butcher of the Rwandan genocide.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He and the president Uganda, Museveni, they are the ones who are continuing to stoke the war in Congo. That's basically those two countries plundering Congo. As far as Tibet and the Uyghurs, everything you've been told about the Uyghurs is a lie. Now, I will say this. The Chinese made a mistake. They did have, they called them reform schools or something for Uyghurs. Uyghurs were being some of them were some of these jihadists we referred to going to Syria. There were terrorist attacks. So, in their attempt to integrate Uyghurs more into Chinese society, they did things they should not have done. But it's not true that there's slave labor. It's not true there were concentration camps. It's not true they destroyed all the mosques. None of those things are true. And as far as Tibet was a feudal government with this, religious hierarchy, very strange sort of political configuration. But people are, Tibetans still have their temples. They're still allowed to practice their religion. So China's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. China is not killing babies in Palestine. China is not killing people in Ukraine. China is trying to have cooperation among nations. That is what they talk about. And I was there with the Friends of Socialist China delegation, and I saw very well.
Also with past guests on this program, Fiona Sim.
Yes, yes. So it was interesting to see this advanced country where I didn't see anybody sleeping on the streets like you see in New York. That's become my new standard for how to judge another place. I would like to come back and talk about it more. But I say anyone who has a chance to, all the countries we're told not to like, take the opportunity to visit them for yourself if you're able to do so. And I see we're at time. It went by so fast.
Yes. Well, we were joined on this. Well, unfortunately, hey, it's almost Wednesday, and Margaret has deadlines for Black Agenda Reports. So, folks, we will definitely try to have Margaret back on the program. But we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Margaret Kimberley. Let me remind people, she is the executive editor of Black Agenda Report, which is news, commentary, analysis from a Black left perspective. Folks, donate generously to BAR. She's also a member of Black Alliance for Peace. Folks, start a chapter and also join Black Alliance for Peace and donate generously to them. And she's also a member of UNAC. And Margaret, remind people what UNAC stands for.
United National Anti-War Coalition. So go to blackagendareport.com to read Black Agenda Report, and you can find me on Twitter. Freedom Ride Blog is my X. Twitter is my handle, and yes, and I have a page on Facebook as well. So thank
folks,
you.
also
Thank
donate
so
to Margaret's Patreon, and also 1+1 accepts donations, so also please donate generously to 1+1. Margaret, best of luck with everything. I'm looking forward to, I hope, having you back sometime after the election if you do have the time. But until then, power to the people and death to white supremacy, settler colonialism, and Western imperialism.
Amen. Peace. Peace out.